and welcome to Proper Horror Show. I've got a fun little video for you for Halloween 2021 in case you haven't finalised all your plans for Sunday. You are cutting it a little bit close, but you know, Halloween is a really fine time of year for cutting things close, right? This is going to be a quick, fun video with just some advice. It's not going to be as in-depth as the last Halloween video I did, which was memorable. Instead, what I've got is just some suggested film lists on a theme and then some sort of assorted selections in case you don't want to do a whole film night and you just want to watch a good horror movie. So given that I have the very unusual but very interesting audience crossover of horror film fans and economics nerds, I thought I'd do something to combine those interests and get you a suggested horror film list that is for anti-state or libertarian horror fans. So this was very much inspired by friend of the channel and all-round wonderful man Radical Liberation, who did a stream on anti-state movies, which was really fun to watch. I got a load of recommendations from that, and I thought I'd just do my own spin on it with just horror films. So this will help you on Halloween night to put down the Von Mises and see women ripped to pieces. I had a lot of fun writing that line. I didn't realise how bad it would be to actually say that. Okay, anyway, on with the first suggestion. So Radlib, if you're watching, I hope you appreciate this. So first off, in our list of libertarian or anti-state horror films, it's... No, I had to do it, sorry. I'll be serious. No, the first one I thought I'd suggest is a German horror film by the name of Black Box, or Auf Deutsch Das Experiment. It's from director Oliver Hirschbiegel. It is based around a fictional retelling of the famous Stanford prison experiment, which is sort of its own rabbit hole and has already been adapted to film in a more straight, serious retelling. Now, the Stanford prison experiment effectively, in short version, was putting one group of participants in a mock prison in the role of prisoners and the other group in the role of guards. And the film really covers effectively what the warping effects of institutional roles are on humans. Obviously, that's got a pretty clear libertarian / anti-state bent to it. But the film also benefits massively from being done by a German director, a German writer, a German cast that carries a certain extra cultural swing to it. And it helps make the film, I think, more raw, more effective. It frankly cuts rather deep, I've got to say, because of that additional angle to it. It's a very effective and occasionally grisly horror film. I would highly recommend it, and definitely watch it with the subtitles. The next one I wanted to suggest was Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Now I'm going to go with the Philip Kaufman 1976 or 78, I never remember, the Donald Sutherland version. Now, I know it's probably really tempting to go with the 1956 version because it is so very clearly anti-communist, but the 78 is a lot more subtle, I think. Now, they'd both work, but the 78 has a really good spin on its angle isn't so much anti-communist, but about the effect mass society has on de-individualizing, depersoning people. And so I feel it works in an anti-state film night for that reason. And it's a fantastic film in its own right. It's incredibly tense. It's got a fantastic leading role by Donald Sutherland, with supporting roles by Leonard Nimoy and Jeff Goldblum. And Veronica Cartwright is fantastic. You probably know the meme, which is sort of unfortunate. The meme sort of maybe takes a little bit of the shine off the film, but I think you'll get so into it that the meme won't even bother you. I'd say it's very accessible because it's not super gory. In fact, most of the fear is just generally coming from the atmosphere of paranoia throughout. But there are some memorable scares in it, and I think this will work for most people. So, highly recommended. It had to be on the list. And the last one, featuring some truly despicable human action, is going to be Hellraiser 2, Hellbound. Now, I know that might sound really weird, like, what the heck? is a sequel to Hellraiser doing in an anti-state film list. So my anti-state reading of Hellraiser 2 Hellbound comes from the fact that the plot is very much revolving around a large, powerful state institution in which someone goes way beyond the remit of their role but is largely unaccountable and is very much focused on removing people's rights, freedoms, depersonalizing them. The obvious lobotomies are a brilliant symbolism of depersonalization in this film. But beyond that, there are some really specific bits that help an anti-state reading of Hellbound, namely that Dr. Chernard, the main antagonist, as well as being the head of an official institution, worships a god called Leviathan. Yep, Samuel Francis fans are having your ears pick up there, I imagine. Now, when you're in the service of Leviathan, not only are you completely amoral, but you're also extremely de-individualized. Your personality is stripped from you and you are no longer an individual. This is, the reading I think is probably quite obvious there, so I won't labour it. Now, I should give a warning with this film that obviously you do need to see Hellraiser to make sense of it, but it's also incredibly gory, extremely gory. So maybe this is more one if you've got quite a strong stomach. You may be familiar with Anatomy of the State, but you're also going to be very familiar with the state of anatomy if you watch this film. I know that was terrible, but I enjoyed that way too much. So that would be my anti-state horror film list. That is Black Box, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Frankly, it can be the 1956 or the 78, but I would recommend the 78. And Hellraiser 2, Hellbound. The second list I wanted to suggest to you is something I've called Scares on the Sly, and this is just lesser known horror films. Films that just don't seem to have caught on. They probably have more of a cult following than anything else, but they really deserve a wider audience and some attention because they're very effective, high quality horrors. The first one I'm going to lead with is Ravenous. Now, what I absolutely love about this is it's not only not super well known, but it makes use of a very underutilized creature. That is a Wendigo. There are almost no horror films with Wendigos, despite them being, one, super scary and an incredibly powerful symbol. The idea of a monster that gets stronger as it feeds on people has great symbolic power and could be really used to tell a lot of stories with a lot of powerful themes. In this one, you've got a really great cast. You've got Guy Pearce, you've got Robert Carlyle. I believe you also have David Arquette. And it's also a historical film. It's set in the past, so it's got a little extra interest from that angle as well. I don't see many people talk about Ravenous, and I think it deserves a bit of attention, so Ravenous had to be on the list. The second one I'd suggest is a little-known Danny Boyle film by the name of Shallow Grave. It might even be his first. It stars a very young Ewan McGregor, Christopher Eccleston, an absolutely fantastic Kerry Fox, and there is a brilliant turn in it from Keith Allen. Probably not going to be known to any American viewers, but an absolute treat for all the Brit bongs in the audience. Shallow Grave is very low budget, it's very down to earth, and there's a heck of a lot of dark comedy in it that increases the realism. And I think that helps it land so much more effectively when it goes into really, really dark places, which, oh my goodness, it does. It's got grisly moments, but it mostly focuses on being kind of a psychological horror that ends in a very, just a really brilliant finale with lots of payoff. I don't want to spoil anything about it, but there's kind of a grand climax that is incredibly effective, and I really enjoyed it. I got it on VHS years ago, and I was just rewatching it every week for a long time. I don't hear people talk about it, but I'd really love people to try Shallow Grave if you haven't seen it. As I mentioned, Shallow Grave is directed by Danny Boyle, so this is a guy who is probably best known in the horror world for 28 Days Later. So you know he has a good way with horror. And the last little known horror I wanted to suggest here was, probably not very well known for a fair reason. It's Curse of Chucky. It's a reboot from 2013 in the Child's Play series. Now, I can totally understand why people didn't want to watch Curse of Chucky. Reboots have a very sketchy reputation, and also it's following the frankly awful Seed of Chucky. I really didn't like that film. I struggled to finish it. It was an absolute mess. And in fact, I can pretty much see people dropping out of the series after Child's Play 3 and not even making it through Bride of Chucky. So if that's you, if you really didn't like the sort of wacky, messy comedy horror angle that they really leaned into in parts 3 to 5, Curse of Chucky could really work for you. I think in reaction to the disappointing, sloppy comedy horror of Seed of Chucky, when they rebooted it, they decided to go very dark and very serious, and it really, really pays off. There is a fantastic starring turn from Brad Dourif's daughter, Fiona Dourif, which is actually kind of touching, you know. It's almost like a handing off of the franchise from father to daughter. And the serious tone helps it deliver some really good scares. It's very concise, it doesn't drag things out. And I would say it's very accessible if you're only sort of vaguely familiar with the whole Child's Play series. But it also has a lot of payoffs for people who followed the series all the way through. There has been way too much talking recently. My voice is not holding up, so bear with me. As well as being very accessible, it's also a brilliantly sort of compact film with a wonderfully looking setting, really crisply directed, some nice dark humour turns in there as you'd expect from Child's Play, but it overall remains very serious and benefits from that. It's got some wonderful sort of punches in the gut in there, and I think if you give it a go, you'll really enjoy it. So that would be my suggestion for a sort of low-key horror, sort of overlooked horror list called Scares on the Sly. That is Shallow Grave, Ravenous, and Curse of Chucky. Now, if you don't want to have a whole movie night and you just maybe want to put on one horror film that's weirdly balanced, gosh, what are you doing not spending all 7 hours of your Halloween night watching horror? If you are a more balanced individual, I've got a bunch of fairly random recommendations of films that I've just really enjoyed this year. Chief among them is Triangle, that is very mind-bending, it's very unusual, and if you're a fan of The Shining, you probably enjoy all the little nudges and winks in the direction of that wonderful film. I would also recommend The Autopsy of Jane Doe, some fantastic acting talent in that. Brian Cox is really good helming this film. I don't want to say too much about it as it goes in some very unexpected directions. It's a lot more psychological than Triangle is, although they both have psychological horror elements and a fair bit of gore. Something tamer but still really good is Murder by Decree. I watched this as part of my Jack the Ripper series. We didn't actually stream about it, but I wanted to watch it for completeness. I got the recommendation from Rob Agar of Collative Learning, and it's a fantastic recommendation. Murder by Decree it's Sherlock Holmes hunting Jack the Ripper, and it's really good. I know that sounds wacky. It's a really good film. Highly recommended. And if you fancy something just more fun and schlocky, then I feel I'm always going to do well recommending Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight. It's an absolute hoot, full of character actors, fairly zany premise, but it's still a strong one. And also Tales from the Dark Side, the movie. One of the earliest horror films I saw, actually, and I still absolutely love it. You may have picked up from this channel that I have quite the weakness for anthology horrors. Well, I hope you enjoyed that and it was interesting, and hopefully I would really like to think that it helped you plan your Halloween movie night, whether you're watching a whole series of films in a theme or whether you just want to watch one good horror movie. I hope there was something in there for you. I tried to include quite a range of options in terms of schlock, psychological, slasher, monster stuff. I've tried to really mix it up so that there's something for everybody. And also I've got to fight against my own obsessive tendencies with horror. If you watch this channel for long, you know, frankly, my list of suggested movies could have literally just been Candyman. Like literally Candyman Candyman, Candyman, Candyman.